This video is going to step you through how to set up a very simple Steam cache server. It's kind of one of the simplest complexity Steam cache servers I know how to set up. First of all, if you don't know what Steam is, you probably don't need to worry about this video, but essentially Steam is a place where you can purchase computer games and download them, and sometimes the download times can be considerable for those games. So when you purchase a game from Steam and you've got a gaming PC, obviously it has to, and if you have 2 or 3 within the house, it would have to download those from the Steam server each time. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up a local cache server, which essentially is a server in your own LAN. And so when gaming PC 1 downloads a game first, it gets stored on the local cache server. So when it's subsequently downloaded by gaming PC 2 and gaming PC 3, it's downloaded over the local network rather than from Steam server. So maybe just to give you a bit of an overview of how much time you can save when you install games by using a server, I've kind of, in blue, is the time it took me to install a game using the Steam server. And I've been through a few iterations of this. I installed a Steam cache server using a standard hard disk drive. It was admittedly a slow hard disk drive. And then obviously the time was considerably reduced from the blue to the orange. And then I installed Steam cache on an SSD, and in grey is the time to install over my wireless LAN, and yellow is the average time to install over a 1 gigabit wide LAN. So as you can see, something that took well over 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes-ish, was reduced to around just over 20 minutes. That's Rainbow 6 to install 62 gigs. So what are we going to use for this? So, you just need an old server with enough disk space. As you can see, the vast majority of benefit you can install on a SATA hard disk drive. It's just going to take a little bit longer to install and set up. We're going to use Virtualbox, which is essentially allows us to install Linux in a virtual machine. We're going to use Ubuntu 18.04, which is the long-term support version of Ubuntu, and we're going to install that in our Virtualbox instance. We're going to use Docker. So if you don't know what Docker is, it's a service that allows you to run applications, and when those applications are set up, it automatically installs all of the dependencies. It sort of comes with all of the dependencies. It's sort of a virtual application host as opposed to a virtual machine. A doc image that has been, so then we're going to download 3 doc images. We're going to download a doc image that has been pre-configured to act as a domain name server. We're going to download a doc image that has been pre-configured to act as a download cache, and we're also going to actually download a Docker instance which acts like a proxy server, and what that will do is interrupt some of our HTTP requests. It is essentially, you don't have to worry too much. It just makes sure that your PC continues to operate when you log on via HTTPS. You don't really need to understand this stuff, you just need to be able to follow the instructions. And I just want to give a bit of credit to Lee Hutchison, who wrote the following link that this solution is essentially based on. If you want to set up something more advanced than my solution, please see Lee's link, because there are better performing solutions you can install, but this is just a simple one that works pretty well. So this video will cover installation of Virtualbox and where to download Virtualbox from, overview of how to set up a fixed IP address. What I'll be demonstrating is one way to do it. You might have to investigate that for yourself if you can't get it working the way I show you. Installation of Ubuntu 18.04 Linux onto the Virtualbox instance, and we'll show you where to download that from. We're going to set up some directories on the Ubuntu server to host the cached Steam files. We're going to install Docker. We're going to install the DNS image, the Docker DNS image. We're going to install the Docker Steam server image, and we're also going to install the Docker SNI proxy that I mentioned before. If you don't install this, you won't be able to log on to Steam, amongst a bunch of other things you won't be able to do. And then the last thing we're going to be able to do is modify the actual game server, one game server, to point to this new DNS, which will then download the Steam games via this cache server we're setting up. Right, so first step is to download your Ubuntu 18.04 image, which you can using this URL, and I'll provide these instructions in the video link. So just start and go to the Ubuntu download site and basically download Ubuntu 18.04 desktop LTS. You'll then want to download Virtualbox. Again, go to the correct URL and download the latest version of Ubuntu for your Windows host and save the file. I'm not going to save it because I've already pre-saved my download. Now to install Ubuntu, you've got to go to where you saved those two downloads, and the first thing is to install Virtualbox. Now just double click on Virtualbox and pretty much follow the default installation procedures. I'm not going to step through those right now because I've already installed Virtualbox, but I will just get to the point where, so basically you'll be challenged by this, say install anyway, then you click next, just continue, take the default installation path. I'm not going to complete that installation. I'm going to start from where you will be when you actually complete the Virtualbox installation. But you should complete that install. So once you've completed the install of Virtualbox, which hopefully is very simple, if you have any questions, please post them to me and I'll try to answer any questions. We need to set up a new virtual machine. Now, please ignore the one that is sitting there right now. That's my existing server. I'm going to set up a new one. There you go, File or Machine New. And I'm going to call it Demo Cache Server. And I'm going to install it on my SSD, which for me is a D drive. And you can obviously install this wherever you want. And you'll want to select the type of Linux and Ubuntu 64 as the version. Now you'll need 2 gigs of RAM and you want to choose create a virtual hard disk now. So click on create. Now choose VDI, that's the default, and dynamically allocated. Now set this number here to how big you think you'll need. But essentially when you select the dynamically allocated option, you will only use as much disk on your physical disk as it needs to. It just tells the operating system it has a bigger one, and as that operating system saves files, it increases the underlying disk size. So I'm going to create a 250 gigabyte instance, but this will only be 1 gigabyte on the actual physical instance when we first set it up. Create. Alright, so now I have my demo cache server. Now there's a few things I need to do. I need to configure your VirtualBox as follows. Under General Advanced, so we go to Settings. Under General Advanced, we want to enable the enable the shared clipboard. Under system/processor, we want to at least have 2 CPUs. Presumably you're not installing this on a Pentium 100 where you only have 1 core. Ideally you'd at least have a couple of cores available. Under display, screen, you might want to increase the RAM. It's not necessary, but I think 32 is probably a reasonable amount. And you'll also want to enable 3D acceleration for later. Under network, you want it to be a bridged adapter, because a bridged adapter essentially connects this adapter to the actual network. And choose OK, and that will save the settings that you've essentially set up for this. Now what we need to do is we need to allocate a fixed IP address to this Virtualbox instance, and I'm going to show you one way of doing it, but there should be an equivalent way depending on what kind of router you're actually using. If you're lucky to have an ASUS one, it'll probably be very similar. So right click on the instance you've just created and go back to settings, go back to network, and expand the little twisty on advanced section. And what you need is this MAC address, and this MAC address is the identifier of this particular Virtualbox on the network. And what we need to do is go to our router, so you need to go to your router, whatever IP address you actually use for that. I'm not going to save my password, and usually under LAN DHCP server there's a configuration section where you can allocate IP addresses. So first of all I need to enter the identifier, which is this MAC address in the correct format, and the IP address I'm going to allocate is 192.168.1.13. I'm going to add that, I'm going to apply it. Now once I've applied that, I'm also going to have to reboot this router. So you can see there's a reboot button there. But what I'm going to do is use the magic of YouTube and come back after I've finished rebooting this router. Okay, here we are back, and as you can see, my machine has been allocated IP address 192.168.1.13, and so hopefully when we test this later on, that's the IP address where our machine is automatically allocated by our DHCP server. Okay, so scrolling down the instructions a little bit. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually take a snapshot of our instance right now, just so we can restore it back if we want to. You just click the snapshot button, and I'm just going to call this pre-install. Okay, and that allows us to, if something goes wrong, we can restore back to it. I won't show you that, but that's an optional thing for you. The next step is to start our virtual machine and install Ubuntu with the minimum install. So we're going to right click and go to start, normal start. The first thing it will hopefully ask us is where our install disk is, and so wherever you downloaded the Ubuntu ISO 2, select that and install it. And then click start. Now this is going to take a little while, this process, and I'm going to accelerate through some of the waiting time and pop out when I need to give you instructions. Now you want to select install Ubuntu and your language of choice. I'm going to install English US keyboard. I'm going to do a minimal installation just to minimize the size of my imprint install, and you can choose to download your updates or not. It won't really affect our installation, but I'm going to turn it on. It'll just takes a little bit longer to install. Then click continue. Choose erase disk and install Ubuntu. We've got a clean disk anyway, so this won't actually erase anything. Go with the defaults, click continue. Choose where you're from. I happen to be from Sydney, Australia. Now, I'm just going to type in something generic. And create a password that's right for you. You're going to have to remember that password for later, by the way. Alright. So while this installs, I'm going to basically accelerate through this process to the next point that you need to be concerned with. So once your installation is complete, click on the Restart Now button. I'm just going to move the Virtualbox over here. Now I want to just review what we're going to do next. So we've basically done a minimal install of Ubuntu. Now there's a few steps that I want to do to just get our Virtualbox set up really nicely. So we're just going to step through that first. This isn't actually part of installing the Steam server itself, but it will make the installation of the Steam server a lot faster and actually improve your overall experience of using Ubuntu in a Virtualbox. Okay, so log on. Hopefully you remember the password you created your instance with. Now we're going to have to type some commands manually. So we'll just wait for it to start. Okay, so once it starts, click on the little Show Applications icon and just click on Terminal. Now you're just basically going to have to type this in because at this point we haven't set up Virtualbox so we can copy and paste. So we'll just type in sudo apt get install build essential gcc make perl. Whoop. Okay, please ignore anything that pops up. Done. Now where was I? Build essential gcc make perl KMS. Now, just because I did a minimal install, so this is actually installing some tools so that I can actually compile things on the box. Should take a few minutes. Oh, you have to spell it correctly. Hopefully I've got it right this time. Choose yes. So this is installing compilation tools. Next we're going to install some tools that allow us to make sure our fixed IP address is working. We'll just wait for this to install. Okay, the next one is we need to install some network tools that allow us to check our network IP address. I just find these handy. Sudo apt-get install net tools. And the next thing we're going to do is check our fixed IP address by typing this command ifconfig. That will hopefully work now that we've actually installed these things. And with any luck, we will see a fixed IP address of 192.168.1.13 allocated to our machine. Perfect. So now we can continue. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the Virtualbox extension. So to do this, we go up to Devices, Insert Guest Editions CD Image. We want to run it, supply our password. Now this is a set of tools that basically allows us to, amongst other things, cut and paste between this machine and that machine, which means we can now, instead of typing commands, we can copy and paste, which makes the whole process a lot faster. After we've done this, we're going to shut down this instance and actually create another snapshot, another restore snapshot. Okay. Alright. So exit out of the terminal session. For software updater, just click remind me later. So now what you want to do is shut the machine down, power off, and we're just going to create a snapshot. So again, click on Take and say Virtualbox ready for setup, or whatever you want to call it. Right, so now we need to start the VirtualBox instance again, and we're going to complete the installation tasks. While that's starting, we'll just review. We're going to install curl, set up some directories to actually store the cache files, and then we're going to install Docker. Then we're going to install the cache Steam server and the SNI proxy, and we need to make sure we do both those two steps before we install the DNS server, otherwise you get in a little bit of strife. So now I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Start terminal. So now we can copy and paste the instructions as we need. So the first one we need to do is actually install curl itself. Enter the password once again. With any luck, curl installs. Select yes. So that was successful. So now we're just going to create a couple of directories and modify the permission on that directory so it can be used as a Steam cache server. They worked correctly. Now we're going to install Docker. So once we've installed Docker, we can install the 3 Docker images as I mentioned before. We basically do the cache server and the proxy server before we mess with the DNS, because messing with the DNS requires a server restart. So if we do the DNS before those two, we sort of have to restart the server halfway through the process. So watching Docker install is a bit like watching grass grow. That was successful. Now I'm going to install the Steam cache server. And download the files. Excellent. Install the SNI proxy. good. Now, installing the DNS server is a little bit messy. What we actually have to do is initiate a setup, and that's going to fail because we already have a DNS running. And then what we do is we remove the DNS, uninstall it, and then attempt to reinstall it. Now, the first attempt, all that will do is actually download the files. And I just want to highlight what you have to do is replace this Steam cache IP address with the fixed IP address you're using for your solution. So again, the first install, all this will successfully do is download the files, and then it will fail. So it's downloading the files now, and as you can see, the install failed with an error. Now what we need to do is deactivate the existing DNS that's already running and turn it off so it permanently won't start. And now uninstall that would uninstall the DNS request, and all this does is allow us to attempt to reinstall it. And the last step we're going to have here is to again run the install, and this time it'll find the files we downloaded locally and then also install the DNS service. So there you go. Now all we should be able to do is we type sudo docker ps and we get 3 services. And now the last step is to restart the server, and that completes our exercise. So exit, restart, and essentially the install of your Steam cache server is complete. Now, if you're on your gaming machine, all you need to do is go to Network and Internet Settings, change Adapter Options, go to the particular network connection that you are in fact using. I'm using Wi-Fi right now, so I'm going to change my Wi-Fi settings. Double click, go into Properties, and then double click on the Internet Protocol version 4 configuration, and instead of obtain a DNS automatically, set the DNS to that fixed IP address that you allocated that Virtualbox instance originally, and choose OK. Okay, now close everything and start Steam, and with any luck you'll be able to log in. There we go, it logged in successfully. Close. So now I'm going to install CSGO from my new Steam server just to check that everything works. And these downloads, now this will not be fast because it's the first time it's been installed, but what I can do is go back to my Steam server, have a look at the statistics, and show that is in fact downloading utilizing disk D. It's very low utilization, but it is in fact downloading and writing to disk D, and as you can see, the Ethernet connection is being utilized on my Steam cache server. So as you can see, it is in fact intercepting the traffic, and believe it or not, it's beginning to cache it. So there ends the video. If you have any questions, please post it. And if you really like this video, please consider liking this particular video and also subscribing to my channel. Thank you.